Hello everybody, so we're going to talk on this presentation about Spanish subject pronouns. So just a quick heads up for those who access the original PowerPoint file and like to print those out. This presentation does use some intensive animation on some of the slides. Those will not print out well. So at the very end of the file there are some hidden slides that you can unhide and print out, and they will come out in a visually sensible format. So let's get started. So what is a subject pronoun? A subject pronoun basically substitutes for the name or identity of the subject of a sentence. For example, Kim goes to the store. It would sound weird to say Kim goes to the store, Kim buys chocolate, Kim drives home. So we can substitute the pronoun she for Kim. And so we can say that Kim goes to the store, she buys chocolate, and she drives home. And that both sounds and would read a lot better than saying Kim all the time. And the common English subject pronouns are I, you, he, she, it, we, they. Make sure that when you say he, she, it, that you enunciate carefully to avoid running all those together. Traditionally, we group these subject pronouns according to person and plurality. What do I mean by person? Well, that'd be first, second, third person, and plurality, that should be kind of obvious. But let's take a look. So here you see the first person are I and we, the second person are you and you or you all. Use guys if you're from New York, or y'all if you're from the South. Also, he, she, it is the third, as well as they. You see the singular on the left and the plural forms on the right. Now, in Spanish, these correspond to yo, tú, él, ella, and notice there is no it. That is correct because there is no subject pronoun for it in Spanish. And it's important here that you lock in this terminology of subject pronoun, because there is another type of pronoun called direct object pronouns, which you'll see in the coming weeks or months into the term. And there is an it in that instance, but that is not a subject pronoun. So you must remember that there is no Spanish subject pronoun for it. And if you need a little bit of a reminder, you could think, shh, it doesn't exist in Spanish. And then on the plural side, you see nosotros, vosotros, and ellos. Now, many are also familiar with the genderization in Spanish. It can be both pesky and interesting, and there are some feminine forms of the plural subject pronouns. You'll see those here as nosotras, vosotras, and ellas. And when would you use those? Well, if you were referring to a group of subject items that are all feminine. So, for example, if you only had female dogs at home, that would be a case for it. Or if you're referring to a sorority or a membership like the Junior League, where all the membership is female, then you would use nosotras or vosotras or ellas. And of course, you put all this together, you get yo, tú, él, ella. And remember, there's no subject pronoun for it. Nosotros, nosotras, vosotros, vosotras, ellos, and ellas. Now, Spanish also has two pronouns for you. We saw already that there was two. And there's also one for usted, which we haven't seen. And knowing when to use which depends on the social register in which you're speaking. Now, tú, which we saw, you probably have been taught or heard in high school or elsewhere that it refers to being informal. And that's not actually correct. The correct terminology would be familiar. And then you have usted, which you can think of as formal, but you should also think of it as unfamiliar, right? And when would you use these? Well, a lot of times they could go either way. If you're referring to the President of the United States, you would use usted. If you're referring to your brother or sister, you would use tú, right? But what about things like parents? Depending on the region or even the family from which you come, you might use tú, or you might use usted, or you might use both. For example, if you normally use tú and then you're in trouble or getting scolded for something, you might just switch over to usted in the same way that you would switch over to being very polite and using yes sir, yes ma'am, etc., right? But I also went to grad school with a Jesuit priest named Jesus Rodriguez, and some of his parishioners referred to him as Father Jesse, and accordingly, you typically used tú when speaking to him, and others referred to him more formally as Father Jesus, and they typically used usted when speaking to him. Other examples, you would use usted with your teachers or professors, and tú with your classmates and friends, right? Now, because of the grammatical properties, usted will always be grouped with él and ella, and likewise ustedes, which is the plural form of usted, will be grouped together with ellos and ellas. And this has to do with conjugation, which is something you'll see very shortly in another lesson. But because the usted and ustedes conjugate identically with él, ella, ustedes, ellos, and ellas, we're going to group those together with it. So here you see usted and ustedes at the bottom. Now, some textbooks we'll insert another line just below tú and vosotros and put ustedes in there. I think that makes things more complicated than need to be. So for simplicity, let's just group those with él, ella, ellos, and ellas. Now, also there's a difference between Spain and Latin America. Spain uses vosotros and vosotras, but Latin America does not. And in Latin America, you're just going to use ustedes to refer to any group of you all, plural. Whether it's you guys or y'all, you're going to use ustedes regardless of whether you're speaking to a bunch of your friends or giving a formal speech at some type of conference. So I hope this is all clarified, the subject pronouns in Spanish. If you have any questions, feel free to post them below or to email me or however works best for you. Thank you.